$650,000. When most people hear that number, they picture a stack of bills, a luxury home, a quiet retirement by the water. But in the world of forensic financial investigation, $650,000 isn't money. It's time. It's thousands of alarm clocks ringing at 6 in the morning. It's decades of skipped vacations, late nights, overtime shifts, and every single paycheck trimmed down by a disciplined hand that was planning for tomorrow. For Lynette Hooker, $650,000 was 30 years of her life, safely locked away inside an AT&T 401k retirement fund. A nest egg built brick by brick, dollar by dollar, meant to secure her future. Now, contrast that with another account. According to a single-source statement provided by a former coworker, Lynette's husband, Brian Hooker, had allegedly already drained and blown through his own 401k. Two people under the same roof. One standing on a mountain of hard-earned security, the other standing on an empty baseline. And then, on a dark, calm night in the pristine waters off Elbow Cay in the Bahamas, time ran out. Welcome back. In this deep dive, we do not indulge in wild internet speculation or sensationalist theories. We build our investigation strictly on verified public records, official law enforcement statements, technical tracking logs, and primary reporting from outlets like CBS News, Ashley Banfield, and direct statements given to investigative journalists by those who knew the couple best. Tonight, we examine the chilling disappearance of Lynette Hooker. A case where the surface story tells of a tragic accident on the open sea, but the digital footprint, the financial paper trail, and the laws of physics tell a dramatically different narrative. Grab a seat. Turn down the lights. Let's look at the facts. To understand how Lynette Hooker ended up on a sailboat named Soulmate in the Bahamas, we have to go back to where it all began, the telecommunications giant, AT&T. Both Lynette and Brian worked for the company for years. It was where they met, where they built their careers, and where coworkers had a front row seat to their personalities, their work ethic, and their marriage. By all accounts, Lynette was the heartbeat of her workplace. Colleagues described her as warm, organized, exceptionally disciplined, and unfailingly kind. She was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, mentored newer employees, and managed her personal finances with meticulous precision. When she vanished, the emotional blast wave at AT&T was immediate. Dozens of coworkers didn't just express sympathy, they gathered in massive numbers, organizing memorial events and demanding answers. She was, in every sense of the word, beloved. Brian Hooker, however, occupied a very different space in the workplace dynamic. A former union steward at AT&T, Brian was remembered by multiple colleagues not as a mediator, but as a manipulative presence, someone who frequently clashed with management, tested boundaries, and knew how to navigate rules to his own advantage. And then there were the subtle behavioral anomalies that coworkers couldn't help but notice over time. Former colleagues noted that when Brian spoke about his wife in front of other people, he rarely used her name. Instead, he routinely referred to Lynette as the kid. On its own, a nickname might seem trivial. But in hindsight, through the lens of behavioral analysis, investigators and colleagues alike have pointed to it as a subtle marker, a linguistic detachment, a subtle minimization of a partner who, on paper, held the financial upper hand in every single way. Let's talk about the money. Because in long-form forensic analysis, the financial structure of a household is often where the clearest motives hide. The confirmation of Lynette's financial standing comes directly from primary reporting and secondary public statements, including interviews given by her mother, Darlene Hamlet. Darlene confirmed that Lynette had managed to accumulate a $650,000 balance in her 401k retirement account through her decades of service at AT&T. To put that in perspective, $650,000 isn't just liquid wealth, it represents complete financial independence. It represents options. Now, let's cross-reference that with federal retirement law and beneficiary guidelines in the United States. Under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, which governs employer-sponsored 401k plans, a legally married spouse is automatically designated as the 100% primary beneficiary of their partner's 401k account. Even if an employee wishes to name their children or parents as beneficiaries, federal law dictates that they cannot do so without the spouse executing a formally notarized waiver relinquishing those rights. Unless such a waiver exists, if a spouse passes away, or is legally declared deceased, the entire balance of that 401k transfers directly to the surviving partner. Think about that financial landscape. On one hand, you have a husband whose own retirement accounts were reportedly emptied. On the other hand, you have a spouse sitting on a guaranteed $650,000 policy payout that automatically flows to him in the event of her death. Investigators looking at a missing person case don't start with assumptions, they start with incentives. And in the eyes of federal and maritime investigators, this $650,000 gap instantly transformed a simple search and rescue operation into a high-stakes financial investigation. This brings us to the night of the disappearance off the coast of Elbow Cay, Bahamas. The official account provided by Brian Hooker to law enforcement was straightforward. Lynette had somehow fallen overboard from their 8-foot dinghy in the pitch-dark ocean waters. A tragic, sudden accident while navigating between their sailboat, the Soulmate, and the shore. When an accident happens at sea, investigators rely on two things: human testimony and digital telemetry. And when the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the U.S. Coast Guard, and independent investigative reporters began overlaying Brian's timeline with the technical data, the narrative began to fracture. Let's line up 4 critical pieces of evidence side by side. Brian claimed that after Lynette fell into the water, he was stranded on or near the drifting 8-foot dinghy in the darkness, struggling to find her. However, multiple independent eyewitnesses situated on Elbow Cay reported seeing a distress flare fired into the night sky at approximately 8 p.m. Crucially, these witnesses were clear. The flare did not originate from a low-profile, drifting dinghy out on the open water. It was launched from the deck of the sailboat itself, the Soulmate. Why does this matter? Because if Brian was out on the water in a dinghy searching for his fallen wife, who was on the main vessel launching a flare at 8 p.m.? Dean Zamzil, a private property owner near the mooring field on Elbow Cay, maintained a high-definition private security camera pointed toward the water. Investigators analyzed the footage from that evening. The camera recorded distinct light events on board the sailboat, Soulmate, at specific times: 7:47 p.m., 12:27 a.m., and 12:32 a.m. During these exact time frames, according to Brian's official account to authorities, no one was supposed to be on board the Soulmate. He claimed to be frantically engaged in search activities on the water. Yet, the physical light signatures captured on high-definition video show activity on the vessel precisely when it should have been dark and deserted. Modern maritime navigation relies heavily on AIS, the Automatic Identification System. It broadcasts a vessel's GPS coordinates, speed, and heading in real time to prevent collisions and track journeys. For the entire month leading up to this incident, the AIS transponder on board the Soulmate maintained a consistent, uninterrupted logging history. It was reliable. It was constant. Until the night Lynette disappeared. Publicly verified tracking logs revealed that at approximately 9:30 p.m., the AIS signal on the Soulmate suddenly went dark. It remained dark for 11 consecutive hours throughout the night, the exact window during which a massive search should have been broadcast to all surrounding ships. And when did the AIS system suddenly jump back online? At 8:30 a.m. the following morning, the precise moment Brian Hooker stepped back onto the deck accompanied by Bahamian police officers. 11 hours of total electronic blackout, perfectly bookended by the disappearance and the arrival of law enforcement. Understand if someone is capable of manipulating tracking hardware. Investigators look at past behavior. And here, Brian's employment record at AT&T yields a staggering piece of secondary public record. Years prior to this voyage, Brian Hooker was formally terminated from his job at AT&T. The reason documented in his employment file? He had been caught manually tampering with and rigging the GPS tracking system inside his company service van in order to obfuscate his true physical location during work hours. Let that sink in. Years before a marine AIS system mysteriously went silent for 11 hours during a life-or-death crisis at sea, Brian Hooker had already been fired by a major telecommunications firm for demonstrating the precise technical capability required to alter vehicle location data. In forensic psychology, physical evidence tells us what happened, but behavioral anomalies tell us how someone felt about what was happening. In the hours and days following Lynette's disappearance, those who interacted with Brian, or listened to his communications, noted a series of reactions that felt jarringly out of sync with a grieving husband whose wife had just been swallowed by the ocean. First, consider the equipment on board. The Soulmate wasn't just a standard sailboat, it was equipped with modern technology, including a high-definition aerial drone capable of flying over water. The waters off Elbow Cay are notoriously clear. In shallow Caribbean conditions, an aerial drone equipped with a camera provides an incredible vantage point for spotting a floating object, a life jacket, or a person in distress. Brian possessed the technical skill to operate it. Yet, according to search records, at no point during the critical early hours did Brian suggest deploying the drone to scan the surrounding sea. Second, examine his direct communication with Lynette's family. After Lynette vanished into the ocean, Brian placed a call to his stepdaughter, Carly. If your mother or stepmother was lost at sea, you would expect a message filled with urgency, grief, or details about the ongoing search efforts. Instead, Brian left a voicemail. The primary focus of the message? He informed Carly that he had successfully retrieved a flotation device from the water. Not a desperate plea for help. Not a breakdown of where the search vessels were sweeping. A calm update about recovering a piece of marine equipment. Perhaps the most haunting behavioral record comes from a recorded 40-minute telephone conversation between Brian Hooker and an individual named Blaine Stevenson. During this extensive interview, Brian walked through his recollection of the moments Lynette went into the water. When describing a human being, his wife of years, falling into the ocean during a dark night, most people use words like fell, slipped, was thrown, or disappeared. Brian didn't use those words. Throughout the conversation, Brian repeatedly used a strikingly casual term to describe his wife falling off the boat into the dark sea. He said she bounced. She bounced. To investigative journalists, legal commentators, and listeners, the word hung in the air like a lead weight. It was a word stripped of emotion, stripped of gravity, and stripped of the dignity owed to a woman who was, at that very moment, missing in deep waters. When you step back and look at the canvas of this case, you are not looking at a single suspicious detail. You are looking at a pattern. Let's line up the ledger one last time. On one side, a woman with a $650,000 retirement account built on decades of hard work, paired with a husband whose single-source reporting indicates had emptied his own. On the water, a claimed dinghy accident contradicted by witness reports of flares launched from the main sailboat deck. On video, security camera footage showing activity on a vessel at 12:27 a.m. and 12:32 a.m., times when the suspect claimed no one was on board. On the digital spectrum, an AIS tracking system that went pitch black for 11 hours, operated by a man previously fired for rigging GPS units to hide his whereabouts. And in the airwaves, a drone left unused, a voicemail focused on a retrieved float, and a word, bounced, used to describe a human life disappearing into the sea. All of these facts, taken together, raise profound, unanswered questions. Questions that federal investigators, maritime authorities, and Lynette's heartbroken family are actively working to answer. We must be entirely clear on the legal record. Brian Hooker has not been charged with a crime in connection with Lynette Hooker's disappearance. He has maintained his innocence, denying any wrongdoing or involvement in her loss, maintaining that she died as the result of a tragic accident at sea. Under the United States Constitution and international legal standards, Brian Hooker is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But Lynette Hooker was not just a name on a police report. She was a daughter, a mother, a cherished coworker, and a dedicated woman whose life was defined by hard work, generosity, and warmth. She deserves to be remembered, and she deserves justice. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, or if you were in the area of Elbow Cay, Bahamas, on the night of her disappearance and saw anything unusual, please do not remain silent. Please contact the primary investigative authorities immediately. The Royal Bahamas Police Force Tip Line. Contact your local Bahamian station or international liaison. The United States Coast Guard Sector Miami Command Center, 305-535-4300. FBI Major Case Contact. Submit tips online at tips.fbi.gov or contact your local FBI field office. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share this video to keep Lynette's story alive. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay analytical, and stay safe.